Hey guys, so today I'm going to teach you guys how to do absolute value equations. So absolute value is a very simple concept. So essentially when we say absolute value, that just means that when we take the value of something, it always becomes positive. So for example, if I take the absolute value of -3, that would be equal to 3. So a couple of things here. First of all, our absolute value symbol are these two straight lines. I didn't draw it too straight, so I could try it again. But basically, you put like a number or some kind of value inside of two of these lines right here, and that always would equal a positive value. So we'll take the positive version of -3, which is 3. If I have the absolute value of -15, that would equal 15. So, oh, the pencil's not working. Okay, this was 3 and this is 15. So you get the point, right? So basically, when I take the absolute value of something, it just means to make it positive. It's a very simple concept. So in this lesson now that we know what absolute value is and how we write absolute value with these little thingies right here, the lines. Now I'm going to teach you guys how to use and solve an absolute value equation. So an absolute value equation is not too hard. It's actually a very straightforward thing. So we in our last videos, I taught you guys how to do one-step equations and two-step equations. So now I think we're going to go a bit further than that. We're now going to be trying to figure out how we can do more complex types of absolute value, more complex types of equations, and specifically absolute value equations. So let's look at an example over here. Let's say I had the absolute value of x. Let's just start off pretty basic, right? And um, actually, okay, let's say it was the absolute value of x plus 3, right? And that was equal to 5. So how do we solve for something like this? So it's actually a very, very straightforward kind of concept. So all we're going to do in this case is we're just going to try to solve in two different ways, right? So you make two separate equations when you're doing this. So the first equation would be where we take everything that's over here and make it equal to this. So typically our normal equation, right? So we'll set it as x plus 3 is equal to 5. But then we also have to make another equation, and here's where it gets kind of weird because now we're going to set the same exact stuff that was in these absolute value brackets right here. We're going to put that there, but we're going to set it equal to the negative version of this, right? So we have to be careful with that. Make sure we're making a negative version as well. So essentially, this part is going to stay the same in this case, but then the 5 is going to be positive over here and then negative over here. So that's all we really need to pay attention to for this one. This is kind of a basic one. I just want to start off pretty easy and light, and we'll go very slowly with these. So now at this point, now that we've created two of these equations, we're just going to try to actually break it down and solve these equations at this point. So we know that x plus 3 is equal to 5. We just subtract 3 on both sides. And that would mean that x is equal to 5 minus 3, which is 2. Very, very straightforward. And then on this side, we could just subtract -3 again, right here, right? And then x would be equal to -8. Very, very straightforward. So the goal of this is to basically find the two values. And basically the idea is that when I plug in a negative, if I was plugging in a 2, for instance, right? I plug in a 2 to the x. 2 plus 3 is equal to 5, and the absolute value of 5 would give me this 5 right here. So that means it worked. And then we could also check by doing the opposite one with this equation over here. If we plugged in a -8 into here, -8 plus 3 is -5. But then when you put the absolute value brackets around the -5, it turns into a 5 because absolute value takes a negative value and turns it into a positive value. So we've just done that here. So now let's try another example. Let's say I'm going to delete this for a moment. Here we go. So now let's try a new one. Let's try a bit more of a two-step equation at this point. So remember in our two-step equation videos over here, we had just gone very straightforwardly and done more complex stuff like this with fractions and those extra things and those extra steps. So we're just going to try to do the same thing right now. So now what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to set something like 2x plus 5 plus 3 is equal to 7. So what do we do when we get to this? So the first thing we do with an absolute value equation is that we get rid of all the extra stuff that's not inside of this absolute value part right here. So the only thing that's not inside of the absolute value part right there is the plus 3. So we're gonna try to get rid of that, and the goal is to just get rid of it, rid of all this extra stuff that's not in the absolute value symbol. So we'll just simplify it by subtracting the 3 on both sides. Very, very straightforward. So we have a 4, and that's equal to the absolute value of 2x plus 5. Pretty simple. So now at this point, we're going to do the same thing I just showed you guys in the last problem. So now we're going to try to use it. We're going to set two equations again. So the first one would be where we take the stuff inside of the absolute value thing right here, and we set it equal to the positive version of this. So in this case, we already have everything we need. 2x plus 5 would be equal to 4. And on the other equation, we would just do the same thing, but the only thing we're changing now is that this would turn into a negative. So this 4 right here turns into a negative 4, but it's set equal to the same exact stuff in the parenthesis or in the absolute value symbol right there. So that would mean that 2x plus 5 is equal to negative 4. And we're going to just do the same thing again. With both equations, we're going to solve them. So we do minus 5 here, minus 5 here. It's negative 1 is equal to 2x. X would therefore equal to, when you divide the 2 on both sides, x equals to negative 1/2. Very easy. Then we can do the other equation as well, and it would be subtracting the 5, subtracting the 5. So then 2x is equal to negative 9. And then we would just divide the 2 on both sides, divide the 2. Therefore, x would be equal to negative 4.5. When you put that in your calculator, it would come out to negative 4.5, or you could have divided that by hand. So now we know how to solve a lot of these basic ones. So I'm going to do one more example of it, and then we'll get to some practice problems that you could try on your own, and then I'll show you how to do those. So let's try another one. Let's try x over 3 plus 2 minus 1 is equal to 3. So again, the first thing we're going to try to do is we're going to try to get rid of all this extra stuff over here. So we just want to get rid of this and get rid of it and put it onto this side instead. So we'll just add the 1 over here, add the 1 over here so we can get rid of it. So we just add that and we get 4 on this side. And then now we have the absolute value of x over 3 plus 2. Okay, so now what do I do here? So the same exact thing we've been doing all along. The only difference now is that we just have some kind of fraction with an x over 3 in it. So now that I know that, I'm just going to try to move forward and do that. So again, we'll set our two equations as we normally do. So we have x over 3 plus 2 is equal to 4. And then x over 3 plus 2 is equal to negative 4. And now we'll just solve both those. And again, just want to make sure you guys understand that you're setting a positive 4 over here and a negative 4 over here. But this stuff stayed the same as it did in this thingy over here. So just keep that in mind. So now let's look at this. We'll just solve this very basically. So we'll subtract the 2 on both sides right here. So 2 is equal to x over 3. So now how do I figure this out? So all I have to do in this case is, because it's a fraction and the x is on the top of the fraction, I could easily just multiply a 3 over 1 on both sides. And when I multiply the 3 over 1, I get the ability to cancel this. So I do that on both sides. And now x is equal to 6. Very straightforward. And the thing we have to keep in mind with that is that if you're confused why I did the x times the 3 over 1, the reason is because if there's something on the bottom of a fraction right here, I have to put something on the top of another fraction when I'm multiplying it, so these could cancel out, right? But then what I have to do, I have to make sure that the bottom of this fraction right here was a 1, because because it would end up multiplying in such a way so that x would be on the top of this fraction, and then 1 would be on the bottom of the fraction, and x divided by 1 is just equal to x. So that's all we're trying to do there. So x is equal to 6 for that one. And then we have to solve the other side as well, because there's two answers to the absolute value equations. So we subtract the 2 on both sides. So I'm going to move this over here. X over 3 is equal to negative 6. Multiply another 3 over 1 over here. Multiply 3 over 1. And x would be equal to negative 18. Oh, shoot. So there we go. Very easy. So the thing you have to remember is to try to break it down very easily and just figure out how to do everything properly. One more thing I just want to you should keep in mind before I put the try it problems up is that let's say, for example, let me erase some of this stuff. Okay, so let's say, for instance, that I had a problem like this: x plus 3 is equal to -2. Do you think we could solve this? Well, actually, we cannot solve it. Here's why. Absolute value equations can never be equal to a negative in the first step. So if you're ever given an absolute value equation and you're given a negative answer, you're saying it's equal to something negative, then you know automatically that there would be what we call no solution, because it's impossible for an absolute value equation to be equal to a negative. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because the idea behind absolute value is that you're supposed to be trying to make something equal to the positive value. But if I'm saying that the absolute value is going to equal to a negative, that would make no sense. So that's why we just choose no solution for that. Now, the reason why when we break down the equations, as I was doing earlier, we create a positive equation and a negative equation is because that's our second step. And when we do a second step, we're allowed to put the negative in. But if you're ever given, if this is a problem that you're given in your math class, and the first step your teacher gives you is this with a -2, you cannot do it. So now let's try some examples. Pause the video, try these problems, and then we'll come back and we'll do these problems. Okay, so I hope you paused the video and you tried the problems. Let's see if you got them right. I'm going to break these down for you now and show you, and we could see if you got them right. So for this one, I'm going to change my colors. Okay, let's say you had this problem for number 15. Absolute value of 7m plus 3 is equal to 73. So again, the first step we always do is try to get rid of the extra stuff over here, because we're just trying to isolate the absolute value stuff. So subtract 3 on both sides. There we go, 73 minus 3 is 70, and that's equal to the absolute value of 7m. So now what do I do? So again, we're going to do our thing with the two equations. We're going to create a positive equation and a negative equation. I'm running kind of low on space, so excuse me if it gets messy. So first we'll say that 7m would equal to positive 70, and then we could also say that 7m would be equal to negative 70. So now that we know that, we just can basically solve this by just dividing 7 on both sides. So m would equal to 10 on this one. And if we did the same thing over here, m would equal to -10, right? So very, very easy. So now we've done that problem. I'm gonna have to erase this because I'm kind of running low on space in this problem over here. Number 16, x over 7 minus 8 is equal to -7. So how do we break this down? So I know I told you guys earlier that if something's ever equal to a negative number, that it means no solution. However, that is only when you have when you have absolute value isolated, and we don't have the absolute value isolated in this case right here. So now we need to isolate the absolute value first and see if the stuff on the right side would be positive or negative. And if it stays negative, then there would be no solution. But if it goes positive, then we could have a solution to it. So let's begin. Let's add the 8 because we need to get rid of this stuff so we can isolate the absolute value. -7 plus 8 is +1, and that's equal to the absolute value of x over 7. So how do I break that down now? So again, since it's a positive number right here, we can continue to go on and try to find the two solutions. So let's go. First thing we could do is set it positive. So x over 7 is equal to 1. And then we have x over 7 is equal to -1. So we multiply 7 on both sides. X is equal to 7. And then multiply 7 on this side, multiply 7 on this side, x would equal -7. So you have two solutions to these problems right here. So again, pretty basic one right here. Let's try the next problem now. So I'll delete this. Let's try it. -9 plus v over 8 is equal to 3. So this one, again, it's more so a two-step equation. So the first thing we want to do is get rid of the 8 on here, so we could isolate the absolute value. So we multiply the 8 on both sides. So I'm multiplying 8 over 1, 8 for 1. So we could cancel right here. And then you get absolute value of -9 plus v is equal to 3 times 8, which is 24. And now at this point, now we can do our absolute value equation. So we could do two of these. We could do -9 plus v is equal to 24. And -9 plus v is equal to -24. So how do we do this? I'd add the 9 over here, and v would equal to 24 plus 9, which is 33. There we go. And then we would add the 9 over here to both sides, and v would equal to, why am I blanking right now? 24 minus 9, essentially negative 15. Negative 15. Awesome. So again, pretty basic. The only thing you have to do before you could solve for the two separate equations was to multiply the 8 on both sides. You could cancel and isolate just for the absolute value. Let's do our final problem now and see if we could get this right. So let's see. We have negative 10 times the absolute value of v plus 2 equals negative 70. So this may have confused you. And the reason why is because of this thing right here. The negative 10 is attached to the absolute value. So you're probably confused. So let's see how we do that. So when something like this is attached to the absolute value, it just means that we're multiplying it. So this in this case, it would be negative 10 multiplied times the absolute value of v plus 2. That's equal to negative 70. So now I know I remember I told you guys that if anything is equal to a negative number over here on this side, that means that it would be no solutions. However, we do not have the absolute value isolated over here because we still have this negative 10. So we need to divide the negative 10 on both sides and then see if the number on this side stays positive. And if it stays, if it becomes positive, and if it becomes positive, then we could solve for the two solutions again. So let's go and do it. So let's say I divided the negative 10 on both sides to get rid of it over here and get rid of it over here. So now the absolute value of v plus 2 is equal to negative 70 divided by negative 10, which is 7. And now at this point, we see over here, this is a positive number, right? So we could actually just go ahead and solve for the two equations that I was telling you guys about. So we'd first do v plus 2 is equal to 7, and then v plus 2, that's a bad v plus 2 is equal to negative 7. So we just subtract the 2 on both sides. V is equal to 5, and then v is equal to negative 9. So pretty basic stuff right there. Nothing too complex, nothing to worry about necessarily, but we just have to make sure we know the rules, I guess. So I'm going to give you guys one more problem, and let's see if we can do that. So let's say I gave you guys x minus 3 is equal to negative 9. Pause the video, try to figure out an answer, and then I will teach you guys the answer and see if you're right. Okay, so I hope you paused the video and you tried it. So the answer for this one would be no solution, and here's why. I was trying to trick you guys and see if you'd be able to spot it. This is equal to a negative number right here, and the absolute value is already isolated, as I keep talking about. So in this case, since the absolute value gets isolated, and this is a negative number right here, and there's nothing else we could do, that means this would be no solution. So keep an eye out for that rule because a lot of people can trick you with absolute value equations when it's set equal to a negative. So just keep that in mind. All right, thanks for watching so much. If you have any questions, put it in the comments. Please like and subscribe this video. Thank you.